That year, my family laughed as my aunt toasted the unemployed one who still found a seat. Then a phone buzzed, and another. Time announces Person of the Year. They glanced, ready to dismiss it, until the face on the cover zoomed in. It was me. The room went silent. My mother's fork clattered. They finally realized, while they called me jobless, I was busy changing America. My name is Riley Calder, and I was trying to become invisible. I sat at my parents' Thanksgiving table in Maple Ridge, Ohio, squeezing my hands together under the worn oak surface until my knuckles ached. I was in my early 30s. The room was too hot, smelling of over-roasted turkey and my mother's cinnamon-heavy potpourri. The clatter of silverware on my mother's best china was a kind of armor, a noise I tried to hide behind. Around me, the Calder family machine was in full operation. My father, Mark, sat at the head of the table, carving the bird with a forced cheerfulness that never quite met his eyes. My mother, Elaine, fluttered around him, refilling wine glasses, her face tight with the anxiety of hosting, and my sister, Jenna, beautiful, pragmatic, and polished, was holding court. Jenna was the blueprint of success in Maple Ridge. She had the stable office job in marketing, the sensible husband, the new build in a subdivision with a name like Whispering Pines. She was everything I was not. The rest of the table was filled out with aunts, uncles, and cousins, a chorus of comfortable, midlife, middle-class safety. They spoke of 401ks, mortgage rates, and new car leases. They were a wall of stability. And I was the one loose brick they all kept tripping over. I was trying to master the art of breathing slowly. Inhale for 4. Hold for 4. Exhale for 6. I had been dreading this for months. The annual pilgrimage back to the jury box. My Uncle Frank, my father's brother, and a man who believed a firm handshake solved all problems, paused with a drumstick halfway to his plate. He squinted at me, the way you'd look at a puzzle you couldn't solve. "So, Riley," he boomed, and the conversation lulled. Just as I knew it would, every head turned. "Mark tells me you're still figuring things out. You still not got a real job, then?" There it was, the gunshot that started the race. My face flushed hot. I could feel my mother's eyes on me, pleading, "Just be normal, Riley, just for one day." I tried to smile, a tight, thin thing. "I'm working. Uncle Frank. I run a community project. It's called the North Star Civic Lab. We're a nonprofit organization." "A nonprofit?" My Aunt Patrice, his wife, chimed in, her voice dripping with pity. "Oh, that's nice, dear. Charity work. It's so good to have a hobby." "It's not a hobby," I said, my voice quiet but strained. "It's a platform. We build tools to help." "Tools?" Frank bellowed, laughing. He slapped the table, making the gravy boat jump. "What, like hammers and nails? You building birdhouses on the internet?" The table laughed. It was a wave of polite, cutting amusement. "She does stuff on the computer, Frank," my father interjected, trying to help but only making it worse. "It's online organizing, right, Riley?" "It's an unemployment club, is what it sounds like," said a cousin I hadn't spoken to in a year. I gripped the edge of the table. "We help service workers and gig economy employees report wage theft and unsafe working conditions. We connect them with legal aid. It's called Coalition Atlas now. Actually, the lab is just the parent organization." Blank stares. The only sound was Jenna delicately setting down her wine glass. "Well," Jenna said, her voice smooth as silk. She smiled, not at me, but at the table at large. "At least someone is having fun with their little projects." She launched into her prepared speech. I knew it was coming. "Dave and I just closed on the new house," she announced, and my mother lit up. "It's 5 bedrooms. A bit much, I know. But the realtor said the equity is just incredible. And we finally traded in my old SUV for the new hybrid. The gas mileage is, frankly, sinful." She took a sip of wine. "And my 401k? Maxed out. Dave's, too. It's just nice. You know, having security, knowing that we're building something real, not just living off donations from strangers on the internet. The jab was so clean, so precise, it barely left a mark until I tried to breathe. Living off donations. She made me sound like a panhandler, not someone who wrote grant proposals until 3 a.m. to keep a server online. My father beamed. That's my girl. That's our Jenna. Always got her feet on the ground. The conversation moved on, swirling around Jenna's success, leaving me in the undertow. I focused on pushing mashed potatoes around my plate, my appetite gone. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic bird in a small cage. My ears had that dull, ringing quality they get when I'm holding back tears or a scream. I wasn't sure which. I looked around the table. These were the faces I had known my entire life, the people who had taught me to ride a bike, who had come to my high school graduation, and now they looked at me with a uniform expression, a mixture of pity, confusion, and mild contempt. I wasn't just a disappointment. I was an inconvenience to their worldview. I was the unread text message they didn't know how to answer. My Uncle Frank, now full of wine and turkey, raised his glass again. He was the kind of man who loved the sound of his own voice, especially after a few drinks. You know, I want to make one more toast. He slurred slightly, grinning. A real one. He gestated toward me. Oh, God. To Riley, he announced. To the daughter who still hasn't quite figured out what she wants to do with her life. But hey, he smiled, thinking he was hilarious. At least she still knows how to show up for a free meal and help her mother with the dishes. The table erupted. It wasn't just a chuckle. It was a full, hearty, Thanksgiving laugh. My mother's smile was frozen on her face. My father looked down at his plate. Even Jenna permitted herself a small, superior smirk. I just sat there. I felt the heat rise up my neck, a burning tide of shame. I saw them all, a jury, and the verdict was in. Guilty of not being normal, guilty of failing, guilty of being me. My mind flashed back, a rapid, painful montage of every other family gathering for the past 5 years. Christmas. Still doing that. Website thing. Honey? Easter. Have you tried just sending your resume to the bank? I know a guy in HR. My own birthday dinner. You're 31. Riley, when are you going to get a real job? They had no idea. They had no concept of the life I lived outside this house. They didn't see the 14-hour days. They didn't see the code I'd taught myself to write. They didn't see the emails from terrified workers I answered at midnight. They didn't see the state-level investigation that had been launched in Arizona, quietly, using the data my little project had provided. They saw nothing but the girl who didn't have a dental plan or a company car. And as that wave of laughter subsided, something else cut through the noise. A phone buzzed on the table, then another, and another, a cascade of electronic chirps. My cousin Mark Jr. pulled his phone out. Geez, news alert. Aunt Patrice picked hers up. Oh, me too. Something big must have happened. In the corner, the television my father always kept on for the football game was playing a news channel during halftime. The sound was muted, but the chyron at the bottom of the screen was scrolling. They're finally announcing it, Jenna said, tapping her own phone screen. The person of the year. This, suddenly, was a topic they could all engage with. It's got to be that politician, Uncle Frank declared, stuffing his mouth. The one who, did the thing. No, I bet it's that tech billionaire, my father said. The one who wants to go to Mars. Now that's a guy who gets things done. I hope it's that actress who does all the humanitarian work, my mother added softly. She seems so nice. They debated, they argued over celebrities, over world leaders, over athletes, and I just sat there. My blood had gone cold. My stomach felt hollow. I knew I was on the short list. My team and I had been deflecting calls from the press for a week, but I never, not for 1 second, believed it would actually be me. It was absurd. It was impossible. They chose presidents. They chose popes. They didn't choose girls from Maple Ridge. Ohio, who ran unemployment clubs from a tiny rented office. The news anchor on the muted TV was speaking with sudden urgency. The graphic behind him changed. "Oh, wait," Jenna said, her eyes fixed on her phone. "They're announcing it now. Let's see who the big winner is." My heart was no longer pounding. It had stopped. It was just waiting. The graphic on the TV screen behind her filled the entire frame, the iconic red border, and a face. And the text scroll at the bottom of the screen, now impossible to ignore, read, "Time Person of the Year, Riley Calder." My cousin, reading from his phone, looked up. His eyes went wide. He looked from his phone, to the TV, to me. Jenna's mouth fell open. "What? All at once, every phone at the table lit up with the same push notification. Every head turned from a screen to my face. The room, which moments before had been filled with laughter and shouting, went utterly, profoundly silent. The only sound was the clatter of a silver fork slipping from my mother's numb hand, hitting the china with a sharp, piercing ching that seemed to echo in the dead air. They stared, all of them. The jury was back, but their verdict was gone, replaced by stunned, slack-jawed disbelief. And for the first time in my entire life, sitting at that table, I wasn't the one who felt small. A smile touched my lips. It was very small. It was not triumphant. It was just steady. And in my mind, the tape began to rewind, back to the beginning, back to the girl they all thought was a failure. To be the family failure, you have to be the family's first hope. In Maple Ridge, the script for your life was written in permanent ink before you learned to read. It was a short, simple script. You graduate high school. You get a sensible degree from the state university, something in accounting, or nursing, or teaching. You come home. You get a job at the local bank or the county hospital. You marry someone from a neighboring town who also has a sensible job, and you settle down, 2 streets over from your parents, until you die. I was the firstborn. I was supposed to be the validation, the one who proved the script worked. I got the straight A's. I was quiet. I was studious. I was the easy one, but I was, in their eyes, fundamentally wrong. My sister, Jenna, 2 years younger, understood the assignment. She read fashion magazines. I read the international news section. She practiced her signature. I practiced my debate points. At dinner, I would try to talk about something I'd read, something that lit a fire in my chest, a proposed minimum wage hike in a state 3,000 miles away, a report on unsafe working conditions in factories. My mother, Elaine, would wave her hand, a gesture of weary dismissal. "Riley, please, don't bring all that ugly stuff to the dinner table. It's Thanksgiving. It's Christmas. It's Tuesday. Can't we just be pleasant?" My father, Mark, would just sigh, looking at me over his glasses. "Nobody pays you to worry about the whole world. Honey, they just don't." Once, my Uncle Frank was visiting and heard me arguing passionately with a news anchor on the television. He laughed, a big booming sound that shook his belly. "Kiddo, no one pays you to argue with a box, either," he said. "Unless you're a lawyer, and you're not the type, you're too sensitive." They weren't wrong that I was sensitive. They were just wrong about what that sensitivity was for. I remember the night Jenna, then a freshman in college, came home for a weekend and declared her major. We were having meatloaf. My mother was practically vibrating with pride. "Jenna, tell your father." Jenna, ever the performer, clasped her hands together on the table, her nails perfectly painted. I was officially accepted into the marketing program. It has a 92% job placement rate within 6 months of graduation. My father put his fork down with a definitive clink. "Now that," he said, pointing his fork at her, "that is a practical, real-world skill. That's smart. That's thinking ahead." He turned his gaze to me. I was a high school senior, deep in a 1,000-page history book on the American labor movement. "You see that, Riley? Practical." Later that night, my mother came into my room. The successful child had been anointed. It was time to manage the problem child. She sat on the edge of my bed, smoothing the comforter. "Honey," she said, her voice soft and full of genuine, misguided love. "I know you love your books, and you are so smart, but we just want you to be successful. We just want you to be safe." "I know, Mom." "So whatever you decide to study next year," she continued, "just make sure it's something that comes with a salary and health insurance. That's all success really is. Riley, just being safe." Safety was their word for coffin. When I declared my major a year later, it was my first real act of rebellion. I didn't dye my hair or get a tattoo. I just chose political science and public policy. You would have thought I'd announced I was joining a traveling circus. "Political science?" my father scoffed, looking at the tuition bill. "What is that?" "That's for rich kids. Riley, that's a degree for people who don't have to worry about rent. What on earth do you do with that?" It was useless to explain that it was the study of the very systems that kept people from being able to pay their rent. To them, if the degree didn't end in ology, ounting, or ursing, it wasn't a real thing. But 4 hours away from Maple Ridge, at the State University, I found my people, or rather, I found the work. I wasn't a natural activist. I hated shouting. I wasn't a marcher. I was an organizer. My first campaign wasn't sexy. It was about the student workers in the campus cafeteria. They were being forced into split shifts, a 4-hour block in the morning and another 4-hour block at night. It made it impossible for them to schedule a full class load, and the university wasn't paying them for the 3-hour mandatory gap in the middle. I didn't carry a sign. I went to the library basement with 2 other policy nerds. We built a database. We collected pay stubs. We interviewed. We surveyed. We wrote a 12-page proposal, complete with charts, proving it was more cost-effective for the university to offer continuous shifts. We presented it to the dean of students. And we won. They changed the policy. They gave the workers back pay. That feeling, it was electric. It was clean. It was better than any A I had ever gotten. It was the first time in my life I felt like I wasn't just observing the world. I was changing a tiny piece of it. I made the mistake of telling my family about it on a call. My mother was silent for a long, heavy moment. Then, "You're protesting? Riley, are you going to get arrested? Your father and I are paying for your tuition, not for you to get tangled up in trouble." "Mom, it wasn't a protest. It was a policy proposal." "Don't get a reputation," she warned, her voice tight with anxiety. "Don't be one of those people. No one will hire you. You've got to think about your future. Those are just city games." I learned to stop telling them. It was like speaking a language they refused to understand. I needed money, so I got a job at a 24-hour diner off campus. I'd work the 10 to 6 shift, coming home smelling of old coffee and fryer grease. I'd sleep for 2 hours, then drive to my 8 a.m. political theory class. I came home for a weekend, exhausted, with dark circles under my eyes. My mother took one look at me and her lips thinned. "This is what all that organizing gets you," she said, her voice sharp with disappointment. "You look terrible. Why don't you just apply at the bank back home? Mrs. Henderson told me they're always looking for tellers for the summer." "I like my job, Mom." "It's not a job, Riley. It's a placeholder." That summer, I tried one last time. We were on the back porch. The air was thick with Ohio humidity and the drone of cicadas. I tried to explain the idea that was forming in my head, the one that kept me awake more than the caffeine ever did. "It's a platform," I said, my voice full of a passion I couldn't hide. "A digital space where all those workers, the diner staff, the campus janitors, the home care aides, all the people who are alone, could share information, anonymously, securely." My father was nursing a beer, watching the fireflies. "It would be a place to organize," I pushed, leaning forward. "A place to build power, to prove they aren't invisible. We could connect them with lawyers, with journalists." My father listened, nodding slowly. When I finished, the cicadas seemed deafening in the silence. He was quiet for a long time. Then he let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't mean. It was worse. It was dismissive. A website? For waitresses? He asked, trying to understand. Riley, that's what unions are for. And they're dying. For a reason. Besides, he took a sip. Who do you think you are? The president? You going to fix the whole world from your bedroom? It's a nice thought, honey, but it's not the real world. That laugh broke something in me. It was the sound of a door slamming shut, locking from the outside. I stopped talking about it, completely. I went back to school. I kept working at the diner, but I also went to the campus library and checked out every book I could find on coding. Python, SQL, JavaScript. I taught myself. I found online forums, hidden groups of civic tech developers and social justice coders. I joined their chat rooms. I learned their language. In secret, I built the first, clumsy version of the platform. It was my real major. It was my real job. My family just thought I was wasting time on the computer. Graduation came. I had a degree with honors. My family sat in the bleachers, looking hot and bored until my name was called. The celebration dinner was at an Applebee's. Halfway through the mozzarella sticks, my mother pulled a crisp white envelope from her purse and slid it across the sticky table. Good news, she said, beaming, her anxiety from 4 years earlier completely gone. She was triumphant. You're done with all that theory. I called my friend Carol at the insurance company. They have an opening for you in data entry. Jenna, now a junior marketer, smiled. See? A real job, with a cubicle and everything. It's not glamorous, my mother said, but it's stable, it's benefits, it's a 40-hour week. There's a pension. Riley, a pension. I looked at the application inside. My name was already typed on it. Data entry, a pension, a safe, sensible, air-conditioned coffin. I slid the envelope back across the table. No, I said. My mother's smile froze. What? What do you mean, no? I mean, no, thank you. I'm not going to take it. My father threw his napkin on the table. Riley, after all that money? After 4 years of tuition? You're throwing it all away? For what? To go back to that greasy spoon diner? I'm moving to Harbor City, I said. My voice wasn't shaking, not this time. Harbor City? Jenna scoffed. Why? To do what? I'm going to work on my project. The project? Jenna laughed, looking at my parents. She's talking about the website again. Riley, that is not a job. It's a fantasy. You can't pay rent with a fantasy. My father stood up, his face red. You are wasting your life. Riley, you are deliberately wasting your potential. We didn't raise you to be this foolish. I stood up, too. No, Dad, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I'm finally using it. I left them at the table with the bill. A week later, I packed my 10-year-old sedan. It didn't hold much. A suitcase of clothes, my aging laptop, and the $400 I had saved from my last 2 paychecks at the diner. I drove out of Maple Ridge as the sun was coming up, a pale orange smear in the rearview mirror. I didn't look back. I was headed to Harbor City, a place I had only ever seen online. I had no job, no apartment, and an idea that my entire family, the only people I had ever known, thought was a complete and total joke. They were right about one thing. It wasn't a job. It was a mission, and I was the only one who believed in it. Harbor City was not a dream. It was a trade. I traded the crushing comfort of Maple Ridge for the absolute, terrifying freedom of anonymity and poverty. My first apartment was a room. I found it on a message board. It was a 10 by 8 foot box in a crumbling pre-war building, shared with 3 other people I never saw at the same time. My roommates were a night shift nurse, a musician who was always on tour in his own bedroom, and someone I only knew by the smell of burnt toast. My bed was a mattress on the floor, shoved against a window that rattled with every passing bus and leaked a thin, icy draft that smelled like diesel. This was the new headquarters of the revolution. I got a job within 2 days. back in the only uniform I knew, a black shirt and a stained white apron at a high-turnover bistro downtown. My life split into two, clean halves, from 5 p.m. until 1 in the morning. I was Riley, your server. I ran plates, refilled water, smiled for tips, and tried not to think about the fact that my manager was actively skimming a percentage from our pooled tips. Then, from 2 a.m. until I collapsed, I was just me. I'd come home, the smell of garlic and old wine clinging to my clothes, and open my laptop. The blue light in the dark room was my son. I called the project Fair Shift. It was an ugly, cobbled-together alpha. I'd built it on the cheapest server space I could find. It was essentially a glorified, anonymous forum, but it had two key features: a section where employees could upload photos of their work schedules, and a simple calculator where they could input their hours and wages. The idea was that they could compare, anonymously, and see who was being shorted, who was being forced into clopening shifts, who was having their overtime stolen in fractions of an hour. It wasn't a union, it was a mirror. I lived on instant noodles, the 30-cent kind, not the 50-cent kind with the flavor packet, and stale coffee from the bistro. I had no health insurance. I got a cold that winter that settled in my chest and lasted for 2 months. Every time I coughed, I could hear my mother's voice. A pension. Riley. Health insurance. Safety. I was living the exact cautionary tale they had warned me about. I was the textbook definition of life on the bottom, and I had never, ever worked harder. The calls home were a special kind of torture. Riley, honey, it's your mother. I'd be sitting on my mattress, my back against the cold wall, laptop burning my legs. Hi, Mom. How are you? We're fine, dear. Just fine. Your father is watching the game. I was just thinking about you. Are you eating? You sounded so tired last time. I'm eating, Mom. Just busy. Busy with what? Though, did you send out any more applications? To a proper company? That insurance place? I bet they're still hiring. I have a job, Mom. I'm waitressing. Right. The disappointment was a physical thing I could feel through the phone line. Well, it's good to have something to pay the bills while you're loitering on that computer. It's not loitering. Mom, it's struggling. I'm building something. Okay, dear. Well, just think about it. Don't let your smart go to waste. The worst call was with Jenna. I made the mistake of video chatting her. I was lonely. I just wanted to see a familiar face, even hers. She answered from her office. She was at a standing desk. Behind her, a wall of glass looked out over a polished, open-plan office with bright, primary-colored furniture. Riley, oh my God, what a surprise, she said, a little too loudly. Hey, Jenna, wow, your office looks bright. It's amazing, right? She spun the camera. We have a free kombucha tap, and a meditation room, and my healthcare plan. My copay is literally nothing. She turned the camera back to her perfect, smiling face. So, what's up with you? How's the big city? It's fine. It's cold. Where are you? That looks small. It's just my room, I said, and for a second, I forgot who I was talking to. The camera on my laptop showed her what I saw. The bare mattress, the pile of code-smeared notebooks, the single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Oh, she said. Her smile tightened. Oh, wow. That's rustic. She held up a finger. Hold on. Don't move. I want to show Mom and Dad where you're living, just for fun. Stay right there. I heard a click, the sound of a screenshot. My blood ran as cold as the draft from the window. Jenna, don't. Too late, she chirped. Sending it to the family chat right now. Mom's going to die. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed. A notification from the Calder family group chat. It was my mother's number. Riley, call me immediately. What is going on? Is this a joke? Jenna was still smiling at me through the screen. Whoops, she said, not meaning it at all. I hung up on her. I threw my phone across the mattress and stared at the cracked ceiling, my heart pounding with a hot, bitter shame that was so potent it almost made me sick. I didn't call my mother back. A few weeks later, Fair Shift got its first mention. It was a tiny local tech blog, one that focused on civic justice startups. The headline was, "New app tries to help coffee shop workers fight wage theft." It was about a small, independent cafe where the owner had been paying all his baristas trainee wages for over a year, claiming they weren't fully certified. Someone had put the schedules and pay stubs on FairShift. Someone else saw them, and they all walked into the manager's office together. The blog post said they got their back pay on the spot. My user base jumped from about 60 people to 500. I was ecstatic, and then I was terrified. The server costs tripled. The bugs were everywhere. My email inbox was a smoking crater of requests, questions, and new reports. I was up for 48 hours straight, just trying to patch the holes, just trying to keep the platform from collapsing under the weight of its first tiny success. I was running a national crisis center from a mattress. I mentioned it on the next call with my father. I couldn't help it. "Dad, the project, it was in the news, a blog. Anyway, it's working." I heard him sigh. It was the, "I'm not mad, just disappointed" sigh. "Riley, that's great, but a blog? What's that worth? A few cents? Listen, I'm proud of you. I'm proud you're smart, but smart has to make money. Kiddo, all this effort, it's just not paying the bills in a real way." He was right. A month later, the bistro I worked at cut its hours for the slow season. My income was sliced in half. I was paying the server bill with my credit card. And then, the surge came. A fast food chain in the Midwest, a coordinated sick-out over holiday pay. Suddenly, 2,000 people tried to log on to FairShift at once, to share their stories, to upload their schedules. My cheap server didn't stand a chance. It wasn't just a crash. It was an annihilation. The database corrupted, the front end went dark, and I discovered, in that cold, dark moment, that the backup plan I thought I hadn't set it up correctly. I didn't have the extra $40 a month for the automated cloud backup. It was all gone. Years of work, all the data, all the stories, gone. I just stared at the error screen. I sat there until the sun came up, until the diesel-smelling draft felt like it was inside my bones. I didn't cry. I was too empty to cry. My father was right. Jenna was right. My mother was right. It was a game. It was a fantasy. And I had just lost. I shut the laptop that afternoon. I went to the library and used their computer to apply for a job. A remote, online data entry job for a logistics company. It was mindless. It was 40 hours a week. It paid, barely, enough to cover my rent and my credit card bill. I got the job. I called my mother and told her. She actually cried. "Oh, Riley, thank God." She wept into the phone. "A real job, with a paycheck. Oh, I'm so proud of you. Finally, you're finally being sensible." I worked that job for 3 weeks. Every day was a gray, flat, joyless expanse of spreadsheets. I was paying off my debts, just like they wanted. I was a success. And I was dying. On a Friday night, I was inputting a long manifest of shipping container numbers. My personal email pinged. I almost ignored it. The subject line was, "Thank you from the bakers." I opened it. It was from a man I'd never met. "Ms. Calder, we don't know who you are, but we used your website, FairShift, before it went down." My heart stopped. "We are the night shift cleaning crew at a commercial bakery in Fresno. 6 of us, for a year. Our manager was rounding down our clock-out times. 10, 15 minutes a night. We saw on your site other people were tracking this, so we did too. We used paper, not the app. We showed our math to the supervisor. We told them we would go to the newspaper." I read the next line 3 times. "This week, we got our back pay, all of it. It was almost $4,000. Thank you. We hope your site comes back." I sat there, in my cold, dark room. The spreadsheet was still open on my screen. I read the email again. $4,000. 6 people. I started to cry. It wasn't a small, quiet cry. It was a full-body, ugly, gasping sob. The kind of cry that comes from a place so deep you forgot it was there. It was all the exhaustion, all the shame, all the rage, but underneath it, for the first time, validation. It wasn't a fantasy. It wasn't a game. It was $4,000 to 6 people who needed it. I closed the spreadsheet. I opened a new folder on my desktop. I named it Coalition Atlas. I started sketching out a new architecture, a secure one, a stable one, a decentralized one. I logged out of the data entry portal and sent a one-line email. I quit. My mother would be devastated. My father would be furious. I took my last $30. I went to the corner store. I didn't buy the beer I wanted. I didn't buy the 50-cent noodles. I bought the 20-cent noodle packs, a whole case of them. I was going to be more broke than ever. I was going to be more exhausted than ever. And I was going to build it right this time. They all thought I was a failure. They thought I was doing nothing. And in a way, they were right. I wasn't just doing nothing. I was starting over. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from building something from scratch. It lives in your bones, a permanent, low-grade fever. After a year and a half of rebuilding Coalition Atlas, I was that exhaustion. I had a tiny, dedicated team of 2 part-time volunteers, a server that was mostly stable, and a slow, steady increase in user reports. We were invisible, but we were functional. I made the mistake of going home for Thanksgiving. I hadn't been back in almost 2 years. The nonprofit I had registered, the North Star Civic Lab, had just received its first tiny grant, $5,000 from a local community foundation. It wasn't a salary. It was just enough to cover server costs for a year. But to me, it felt like a victory. I was tired. I missed the smell of my mother's baking. I just wanted, for 24 hours, to not be the one in charge. I wanted to breathe. I walked in the door, and the first words out of my mother's mouth, after a stiff, awkward hug, were, "Oh, good. You're here. The potatoes won't peel themselves, and your father's entire family is coming in an hour." She handed me an apron. "You're in charge of the green bean casserole, too, and the sweet potatoes. Since you're not on a schedule, you can handle the kitchen prep." Not "how are you?" Not "we missed you." Just, "You're free? Get to work." The entire day was a blur of me running between the kitchen and the dining room, refilling drinks, clearing plates, while Jenna sat on the couch, showing everyone photos of her new patio furniture on her new phone. She was pregnant with her first child, a fact which had elevated her from successful daughter to bearer of the family line. I was just the help. A few weeks later, my phone rang. It was Jenna. "Hey, Real," she said, her voice breezy. "So, Dave and I are going to Aruba for a long weekend, pre-baby celebration, you know." "Oh," I said, my laptop open on my knees, a line of code refusing to compile. "That's great, Jenna." "Yeah, so we need you to come up and watch Leo." Leo was her toddler. I paused. "Jenna, I can't just leave. I'm working." She laughed. It was a genuine, tinkling laugh. "Oh, come on, Riley. Working? Dave and I are taking a real vacation because we have real jobs. You're just doing your app thing. You can do that from anywhere, right? You're not busy." The words hung in the air. You're not busy. "It's not an app, Jenna." "Whatever. You love Leo, right? Just come. It's only 3 days. It'll be good for you to get out of your sad little apartment. Besides, Mom and Dad are busy." I looked at my wall, which was covered in sticky notes, outlining a new database schema. I looked at the email I was halfway through writing to a pro bono lawyer in Chicago. I was working 14 hours a day. "Please," she said, the breeziness gone, replaced by the whine of someone who expected a yes. "I'm your sister." I said yes. I loved my nephew. I spent 72 hours in her pristine gray and white house, surrounded by live, laugh, love signs, watching cartoons and cleaning up spilled juice. I did it because I loved him, but when Jenna and Dave came back, tanned and holding a bag of duty-free liquor, they didn't say thank you. Jenna handed me a $50 bill. "For your trouble," she said, not like a payment, like a handout. "I don't want this, Jenna." "Just take it," she said, pressing it into my hand. "I know you need it. Go buy. Whatever it is you buy." I had become the official free babysitter for the entire extended family. My unemployment was now a utility, a resource they could all tap. Whenever I came home for Christmas or Easter, it was just assumed. Riley will watch the kids. Riley will drive Aunt Mary to the pharmacy. Riley will figure out the new Wi-Fi router. My project was a cute, childish quirk, but my time was public property. And all the while, the mockery continued, just softer, more pitying. One evening, we were all gathered at my parents' house, the TV droning on in the background. A local news segment came on, highlighting some new social goods startup in the city, a buy one, give one shoe company. My mother, watching the bright-eyed, 22-year-old CEO, clasped her hands to her chest. "Now, see," she said, nodding at the screen. "That is just wonderful. That's doing something useful, using your smarts to actually help people, to create something, not just sitting in front of a computer all day complaining about how unfair the world is." She was speaking to the whole room, but her eyes were on me. I felt the familiar hot twist in my gut. I tried, one more time, to make them see. "Mom, that's kind of what I do. Fair Shift. The project I'm working on. It's growing. We have over 10,000 users now. We're being looked at by a few national nonprofits as a case study." My father, who had been dozing, opened his eyes. He'd heard nonprofit, his trigger word for wasting time. He looked at me with a weary, almost bored expression. He'd had this argument with me in his head 1,000 times and was tired of it. He picked up the remote and changed the channel to a football game. "That's great, honey," he said, not looking at me. "That's just great. When Time magazine invites you to be on their cover, you let me know, then we'll talk. Until then, I'm trying to watch the game." The rest of the room went back to their own conversations. My uncle, hearing the exchange, leaned over to my aunt and said, just loud enough for me to hear. At her age, still, living off a project sounds like a polite way of saying you're living off the goodwill of strangers. It's not respectable. The real breaking point came about 6 months later. It came, as all my family's betrayals did, disguised as a favor. It was Jenna again. She and Dave were buying their second house, the 5-bedroom one. The market was hot, and their pre-approval was tricky. She called me, not breezy this time, but with a strained, artificial sweetness. "Ril, hi. So, I have the biggest favor to ask. You'd be saving my life, literally." "What is it, Jenna?" I was wary. "Sss. The bank is being stupid about our debt-to-income ratio. Just because Dave has that one car loan, it's so dumb. Anyway, the mortgage broker said if we just had a cosigner, just to get the papers through, it would all be fine. And we thought, who better than my big sister?" I went cold. "Cosign on a house?" "It's just a formality," she said quickly. "It's not like you'd ever have to pay. It's just your credit. It's so clean. Because you don't have any real assets or debts. You've got nothing to lose, really. It's just sitting there, not doing anything. Why not use it to help your family?" You have nothing to lose. My nothing was the perfect credit score I had painstakingly built, guarding it like a dragon, paying my $30 credit card bill on the dot every month, because I knew it was the only asset I had in the world. "Jenna, that's a huge financial risk." "Risk?" she scoffed. "Risk for you, Riley? We're talking about a $700,000 house. Dave and I make plenty of money. It's just a signature. Don't be selfish." "I need to think about it," I said, my voice wooden. What's there to think about? She snapped. Just do it. For me? For your future nephew. Gosh, don't make this a thing. I hung up. I did my research. I spent an hour online, and then I called a free legal aid number. One of the partners I'd listed on Coalition Atlas. The lawyer was blunt. Co-signing meant I was 100% liable for the entire loan. If Jenna and Dave missed one payment, for any reason, the bank would come after me. My tiny grant-funded organization, my entire life. They could drain my accounts. It wasn't a favor. It was a loaded gun. I called her back. Jenna, I can't. I'm sorry. The silence on the other end was absolute. Then, you can't? It's not a good idea. For me, financially. Financially? She shrieked. What finances do you have, Riley? Your noodle budget? I'm talking about my home, my family, and you're worried about you? After everything Mom and Dad have done for you? After all the times I've defended you to them? Defended me? Jenna, You know what, Riley? You're unbelievably selfish. You're a black hole of need. You just take... She hung up on me. 10 minutes later, my father called. He didn't say hello. What the hell is your problem? He yelled. I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Dad, I can't co-sign on a house. Your sister, your pregnant sister, asks you for one thing, a simple thing, a piece of paper, and you spit in her face, after all we've done for you, paying for that useless degree, sending you money when you were in trouble 2 years ago. He'd sent me $100 for my birthday, which I'd sent back. Dad, it's not a piece of paper. It's my entire financial future. What future? He boomed. You don't have a future, Riley. You have a hobby. You're an adult child. Your sister is out there building a life, a real adult life, and you're hiding in some dirty apartment playing on your computer. It's not a game, I was shouting now, tears of pure rage burning my eyes. It's work. It's hard work. Then why doesn't it pay? He shot back. Why are you still broke? Why do you look like a goddamn refugee every time you come home? You know what you are, Riley? I was silent. I was shaking. You're a parasite, he said. The word was cold, clinical. You attach yourself to these stories of injustice. You feed off other people's problems. It gives you an excuse to not get a real job, an excuse to not contribute, an excuse to fail, over and over, and call it sacrifice. You hide behind this mission to avoid any kind of adult responsibility. That's what you are, a parasite. I couldn't breathe. It was as if all the air had been punched out of my lungs. A parasite. I found my voice. It wasn't loud. It was sharp, and it was new. A parasite, I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. Okay, Dad, you want to know what I did this week? I worked, for free, for 14 hours a day. I took a call from a woman in Nebraska whose boss has been stealing her overtime for 6 years. I put her in touch with a lawyer who is now suing that company for $200,000. I spent 4 hours patching a security hole to stop a meatpacking plant from finding out which of their employees was reporting them for safety violations. I am doing more work. I am creating more value. I am helping more people before breakfast than you or Jenna or anyone in that house does in an entire year. And you call me a parasite? Because my bank account doesn't look like yours? Don't you take that tone with me, young lady. I'm done, I said. I'm done. I hung up the phone. I sat in my room, the one I paid for, with the laptop I paid for, running the project I built, and I packed a small bag. I drove all night, back to Maple Ridge. It was the middle of winter. The sky was a hard, gray sheet. I walked into my parents' house. They were in the kitchen. They looked up, surprised. I didn't say anything. I went to my old bedroom. I packed the last of my high school yearbooks, the one framed photo of my grandmother, the few things I had left. My mother stood in the doorway. What are you doing? I'm getting my things, I said, not looking at her. Your father? He was just upset. He was honest, I said. For the first time, He said what you all think. I zipped the bag. I walked past her, down the stairs. My father was at the bottom, his arms crossed, his face a mask of stubborn, wounded pride. "So that's it?" he said. "You're just going to run away?" "No," I said, pulling on my coat. "I'm finally leaving. There's a difference." I walked out the front door, into the biting cold. As I got to my car, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my mother. "Come back when you're grown up." When I got back to Harbor City, I felt the parasite label like a brand on my skin. It was a cold, clarifying rage. It burned away the last wisps of longing for their approval, the last childish hope that they would one day understand. They wouldn't. The door was closed. I didn't block their numbers. That felt too dramatic, too final. I did something colder. I created a new group chat on my phone, put my entire family in it, and then muted the notifications. Permanently. I could check it if I wanted to, which I knew I wouldn't. It was my own digital version of putting them in a box in the attic. My life simplified. It was just the work. I was free. I had no one to please, no one to answer to, no one to disappoint. The exhaustion was still there, but the shame was gone. The silence in my apartment was no longer lonely. It was productive. I poured everything, the rage, the grief, the tiny, stubborn kernel of hope, into a single grant application. It was for the Equitas Foundation, a name I'd seen on a few obscure forums. They were anonymous, low profile, and specialized in high-risk, high-impact digital infrastructure projects. I didn't tell them my life story. I didn't mention my family. I just gave them the data. I gave them the plan for Coalition Atlas. I wrote it over a single, 72-hour caffeine-fueled stretch. I sent it, expecting nothing. 6 weeks later, an email appeared. "Your proposal has been approved for the initial seed grant." It was $25,000. I stared at the number. It wasn't a salary. It wasn't validation. It was, in my father's language, real money. It was enough to be real. I didn't go out and celebrate. I didn't buy new clothes. I didn't even move out of my rattling, drafty room. I did two things. I paid for a year's worth of high-security, high-capacity server space with automated, redundant backups, and I hired Maya. Maya was a user interface designer I'd met in one of those late-night coding forums. She was based in Seattle, had 2 kids, and did freelance work between 3 and 6 in the morning. The only time she had to herself, I offered her 15 hours a week at an actual, respectable rate. She was the first official employee of the North Star Civic Lab. She was my entire team. "First things first," Maya said, on our first video call. Her face tired, but her eyes bright. "We need to burn the name FairShift. It sounds like a payday loan app." She was right. It was my last link to the old broken version. "I have a new one," I said. "Coalition Atlas." "Good," she said. "It's strong. It's a map. Let's build the map." For 3 months, I handled the back end, the database architecture, the security protocols. Maya redesigned the entire user experience. It was no longer just a forum. It was a tool. We built encrypted intake forms that routed reports directly to a database of vetted, pro bono employment lawyers, state by state. We built a data visualization dashboard, not for the public, but for journalists and academics we could verify. We built a library of Know Your Rights guides, translated by volunteers into 5 different languages. It was no longer just a mirror, it was a weapon. And then, the scandal broke. It started with a single, anonymous report on Coalition Atlas, a night shift stocking crew at a national, big-box supermarket chain, the kind of place with family values in its commercials. The report was simple. Their new time clock system was automatically clocking them out for a 30-minute lunch they were never allowed to take. They were forced to work through it, unpaid, every single night. The system flagged it. We found 3 other reports from the same chain, different states, same story. We contacted a lawyer in our network. He connected us with a labor reporter at a major national newspaper. I gave the reporter secure, anonymous access to the data. I showed him the pattern. He started digging. 2 weeks later, it was the front page story. Digital theft: how supermarket chain steals millions in wages from its night shift workers. The article cited us, by name. Data compiled by Coalition Atlas, a nonprofit labor platform, shows the pattern is company-wide, potentially affecting over 50,000 employees. My phone did not stop ringing, not my personal phone, but the official North Star contact number, which was really just a cheap VoIP line routed to my laptop. It was reporters. It was other law firms. It was other workers from the same chain, saying, "Me too." The supermarket chain's stock dropped 8% in one day. They suspended the time clock system and launched an internal investigation. A class action lawsuit was filed a week later, using our data as the core evidence. We were on the map. The Equitas Foundation, without me even asking, wired another $50,000 to our account. The email said, "For growth, keep going." I called Maya. "I can offer you full-time," I said, my voice shaking. "With benefits." "About damn time," she said. That month, for the first time in my adult life, I received a paycheck. It wasn't much, just enough to live on. I had set up a proper payroll, with me and Maya as the only employees. I walked into a drugstore, not because I was sick, but just to see if I could. I bought a bottle of aspirin and handed the pharmacist my new health insurance card, a real, plastic card with my name on it. He swiped it. The transaction went through. I walked out, sat on a bench, and looked at the card. My father's words echoed in my head. Health insurance, that's all success really is. I thought I had rejected that, but holding the card, I realized the difference. He saw it as a prize you received from a real job. I saw it as a tool, a piece of armor I had forged for myself, a basic human right I had finally secured for my tiny team. It felt like a different world, not because I was safe, but because I was free from that specific, gnawing fear. The work accelerated. The city council in Harbor City was debating a new gig worker Bill of Rights. They invited me to testify. I sat in a cavernous, wood-paneled room, my hands shaking so hard I had to hide them under the table. When I spoke, I didn't talk about policy. I just read 3 stories from the Atlas, verbatim. A driver who was deactivated for fraud after a passenger falsely accused him. A delivery worker who broke her ankle and was just sent an automated get-well-soon email with no compensation. A local news channel carried the hearing live. I found out because my phone buzzed, in the muted family chat. It was a text from Jenna. "Mom saw you on TV. She said you look pale. Are you still not eating right?" I looked at the message, not, "Wow, you were testifying," not, "That's amazing," just, "You look pale." They had seen me, in a suit, speaking to their city government, and had immediately changed the channel. The data from Coalition Atlas was no longer just stories. It was a trend. We were the only ones collecting this specific, granular, worker-reported data, and it was becoming valuable. A policy institute in California used our findings to help draft a new state law protecting warehouse workers. A senator's office in Illinois called, asking for a breakdown of wage theft reports by zip code. Thank you emails flooded our inbox, and I made Maya and our 2 new part-time hires read every one. "Thank you for seeing us. I thought I was the only one. Because of your site, I'm getting my job back." This was our salary. This was our pension. I never told my family. What was the point? It wouldn't be real. I would hear my father's voice in my head. That casual, dismissive line, when Time magazine invites you to be on their cover, "You let me know." It was the most absurd, impossible benchmark he could have set, and it had become my shield. Until that happened, I had nothing to report. Then the journalist called. She wasn't from a local blog or a trade paper. She was a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter from one of the most respected magazines in the country. "I've been following your platform for a while," she said, her voice fast and sharp. I'm not interested in the supermarket scandal. I'm interested in you. How did you build this? Why? I tried to deflect. It's not about me. It's about the team. It's about the workers. The platform is the story. Respectfully, Ms. Calder, she said, the platform is a piece of code. You're the story. People don't trust code. They trust people. I want to tell your story. I was terrified. I was terrified of becoming the face, of my family seeing it, of the parasite label being thrown at me. But Maya sat in on the call with me. Riley, Maya said to the reporter, she won't do it unless you promise to focus on the collective. But I think you're right. People need to see who is fighting for them. I reluctantly agreed. The interview was brutal. She didn't just ask about the code. She asked about my background, my hometown, my motivation. I spoke in generalities. I talked about a lack of understanding for this kind of work. I never mentioned their names. I never used the word parasite. The article came out. It was a 4,000-word feature. The title was The New Face of American Labor Justice. It had a picture of me, not a polished headshot, but a candid photo from the city council hearing, me leaning into the microphone, my face tired but determined. It went viral. It was everywhere. I waited for the explosion from my family. It came, as always, in the muted group chat. My phone buzzed. It was a link to the article, posted by my Uncle Frank. His only comment? Is this our Riley? Looks like some fancy PR. Jenna replied, Yeah, I saw that. Someone must be paying a lot of money for her to get that kind of press. Wonder what that's about. Weird. My mother added, I still think she looks pale. I closed the chat. They had read the article, an article that called me one of the most influential figures in the new labor movement, and had concluded it was just a PR piece. They thought I had paid for it. It was the only way their brains could process it. I laughed. It was a short, sharp, bitter laugh. My father was right. It wasn't real. Not even this was real enough. I went back to my inbox, ready to work. There were hundreds of new emails. Emails from lawyers, from donors, from workers. And one, sitting at the very top, that made my blood freeze. It was from an address I didn't recognize. A simple, corporate address. The subject line was just 4 words. Time. Inquiry about profile. I just stared at it. I didn't open it. I just stared at the subject line on the screen until the letters blurred. I stared at the subject line for a full 10 minutes. Time. Inquiry about profile. It was a phantom. It couldn't be real. It was a sophisticated phishing scam designed to steal my database. It was a joke. It was a mistake. I clicked on the sender's details. The email address was real. The domain was correct. My hand was shaking so hard I could barely click to open it. The email was short, professional, and terrifying. It wasn't spam. A senior editor, David Chen, introduced himself. He said they had been tracking the Coalition Atlas story since the supermarket scandal. He referenced the feature article in the other magazine. He said they were doing a long-form series on the post-pandemic labor market and the new faces of organized labor. He wanted to schedule a call. My first thought, the one that hit me with the force of a physical blow, was my father's voice. When Time magazine invites you to be on their cover. I slammed my laptop shut. I stood up from my desk and walked to my tiny kitchen. My heart pounding a sick, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I poured a glass of water, but my hand was shaking so badly I spilled it down my shirt. I was going to be sick. I picked up my phone and speed-dialed Maya. She picked up on the second ring, her voice already tired. What's on fire? I just got an email, I said, my voice a reedy, unfamiliar whisper. From Time magazine. What, like a subscription offer? No, Maya, from an editor. They want to interview me, for a long-form profile. There was a long silence on the other end. Then I heard her set something down. A cup, probably. Oh, she said. Her voice was suddenly very, very serious. Oh, shit. I'm just going to ignore it, I said. the words tumbling out. It's a distraction. It's going to turn this into a celebrity thing. It's exactly what we said we didn't want. It's going to paint me as the face and erase the collective. And Riley, Maya interrupted, her voice sharp and grounding. Shut up. You are not going to ignore it. We're having a team meeting, right now. 20 minutes later, my tiny team was on an emergency video call. Me, Maya from Seattle, and our 2 new hires, Ben, a data viz whiz in Austin, and Aisha, a community outreach coordinator in Detroit. They were both in their early 20s, and they were looking at me with eyes as wide as dinner plates. So, time? Ben said, his voice cracking. Like, time? We don't know what it is yet, I said, trying to regain control. It's probably just a small quote for a bigger article. My concern is the personal profile angle. It personalizes the movement. It puts me at the center, not the workers. It's dangerous. Maya, as always, was the pragmatist. She leaned into her camera. It's also a megaphone, Riley, a megaphone the size of a stadium. We've been trying to get that new wage theft bill in front of the Senate committee for 6 months, an article in Time. That doesn't just get you a meeting. That gets you the keynote. We have to at least consider what this could do for the legislation. She's right, Aisha said softly. The people I talk to, the home care workers, the delivery drivers, they don't trust systems. They trust people. Seeing you, seeing your story. It makes the atlas feel human, not just an algorithm. I looked down at my hands, my story. My story was ugly. My story was a drafty room and instant noodles. My story was being called a parasite at Thanksgiving. What if they ask about my family? I said. The question's so quiet, I barely heard it myself. Maya's face softened. Then you tell them what you're comfortable with. You set the ground rules. You are in charge. Riley, you're the one they want. That's power. Use it. So I used it. I agreed to the interview, but with conditions. It would take place at our office, which was just a slightly larger, just as drafty rented room in an old building. Not in some fancy studio. The final piece had to include Maya and the team, and the focus, I insisted, had to be on the data and the workers' stories. The reporter, Sarah, was not who I expected. She wasn't flashy. She was in her 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She came in with a single audio recorder, sat on a folding chair, and looked around the room, at our second-hand desks and our wall-sized whiteboard covered in my frantic handwriting. This is it? She asked. This is it, I said. For 2 hours, we talked. I was on safe ground. We talked data models. We talked security protocols. We talked about the supermarket case, about the gig worker bill. I gave her the anonymous, powerful stories from the atlas. I was articulate. I was passionate. I was in control. Then she put her pen down. This is all fascinating, Riley, and your data is compelling, but it's not the story. I tensed. The data is the story. Gyo. No, she leaned forward. The data is the what. I'm interested in the why. Why you? You're not a labor organizer from a union family. You're not a DC policy wonk. Your file says you're from Maple Ridge, Ohio. Your sister's a marketing exec. Your father's in insurance. What happened that made you the one to build this? My blood went cold. She had done her research. I saw an injustice, I stammered, falling back on my talking points. I saw a gap in the system. It's personal, isn't it? She asked, not unkindly. I read that other feature. It hinted at family skepticism. She looked me right in the eye. What did they call you? Riley? Parasite. Failure. Hobby. Wasting your life. Unemployed. I could feel the blood drain from my face. I looked away. They didn't understand the model. It's a generational gap. They come from a world of pensions and 9-to-5s. So, Thanksgiving dinners, she pressed. When they asked you what you did, what did you say? I just stared at her. I'd rather not talk about my family, I said, my voice tight. They're private citizens. Sarah nodded, picked up her pen, and moved on, but I knew I had given her a thread. A week later, a call came from the photo editor. Riley, Sarah's first draft is incredible. We're seeing this as a major visual story. We want to capture the world you're living in, the world you're fighting for. Okay, I said, wary. We have a concept. A 24-hour supermarket. We'll shoot it at 2 a.m. We want you in the aisle, powerful, looking at the camera, and in the background, out of focus. We'll have the night shift stalkers, working. It's this beautiful symbolic contrast, the invisible and the woman who sees them. I felt a sudden hot surge of rage. Absolutely not. Excuse me? The editor sounded stunned. They are not out of focus. They are not symbolic. They are not a prop in my story. They are the story. I will not ever use them as a blurred background for a shot of me. That is the exact kind of performative, poverty tourism bullshit I am fighting against. If you want a photo, you can come back to this office, or you can take a picture of the server. But you will not put me in a frame and call me their savior. I'm a tool builder. That's all. I hung up, my hands shaking. Maya found me at 3 a.m, still at my desk, staring at a wall. I had my head in my hands. You look like hell, boss, she said, pulling up a chair and handing me a cup of what tasted like mud. I hung up on the Time photo editor, I mumbled. Yeah, she said. I heard the voicemail. Good for you. They'll call back. They want to make me a symbol. Maya, I said, my voice breaking. I was so tired. It's all I ever hated. I'm just a person. I'm just a coder. You are Riley, she said, her voice soft but firm. But you're not just that anymore. You're not. You're the one who built the Ark, and all these people. They need to know you're not some Silicon Valley billionaire who's going to sell their data the second it gets profitable. They need to trust you. She leaned forward. That story, the one you won't tell Sarah, the one about your family, that's the one that matters. It's private. Maya, it's humiliating. Is it? She asked. Or is it the story of literally every single person who reports on our site? Every person who's been told they're lucky to have a job. Every person who's been told, that's just the way it is. Every person who's been humiliated at a family dinner for not being a success. Your story isn't your shame. Riley, it's your credential. Your story will save more people. But you have to let them see the scars. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my mattress in my cold room, the one my sister had screenshotted, the one my family thought was the sum of my failure. I opened a blank document, and I started to type, Parasite, wasting your life, unemployed, it's a hobby. When are you going to grow up? Just get a real job. When Time magazine invites you to be on their cover. I looked at the list. It was my entire life's report card, written by them. The next morning, I called Sarah. I need to amend my answer, I said, my voice steady, about my motivation. The article came out 3 weeks later. It wasn't the cover, it was a 10-page spread, deep in the features well. The headline was, The Atlas of Injustice. It was a brilliant, in-depth piece on the platform, on the data, on the legislative impact. It quoted Maya and Ben and Aisha, and it had one section, right in the middle. When asked about her motivation, Sarah wrote, Calder is quiet. She is not a product of the DC think tank world. Her drive is more personal. This work is often misunderstood, she says. I was told by people I loved that this was a fantasy, that I was a failure for pursuing it. I was the unemployed one at the Thanksgiving table. I was told I was a parasite for not having a 401k and a real job. I'm building this platform not just for the workers who are told they're invisible, but for every single person who has been told their worth is tied to their paycheck. The day it hit the newsstands, my phone, which was still in the muted family chat, buzzed once, then again, and again, a rapid-fire explosion. I opened it, my stomach in knots. Aunt Patrice. A neighbor brought this magazine to our house. I have never been so embarrassed. You told the whole world our business? Jenna. You're unbelievable. Riley, making us out to be the villains. Just to make your little story sound more dramatic. They exaggerated all that, right? You didn't really tell them that? My father. You have a right to your life. You do not have a right to drag our name through the mud for your own PR. I read the messages. It hurt. It was a sharp, familiar sting. But it was duller this time. It felt distant. I closed the chat. I was trying to work. The donations, the real donations, were flooding in. Our server was straining under the weight of new users. I was trying to focus on that. My phone rang. The screen showed the New York area code. David Chen, the editor from Time. I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't ready for a fight. He called back, immediately. I sighed and picked it up. Riley Calder. Riley, David Chen, listen. I know the feature just dropped, and it's doing incredible numbers, but we need to talk. We're finalizing the shortlist for the Person of the Year. I stopped breathing. Okay, am I in trouble for the photo thing? There was a pause. What? No, we loved it. We're using the shot of your office. Listen, Riley, the committee, we're putting you on the shortlist, officially, as a top 5 candidate. I sat down. Hard. The folding chair creaked under me. What? Congratulations, Ms. Calder. The game just changed. The call from David Chen was one thing. The official email was another. It landed in my inbox an hour later. A sterile, corporate document confirming my place. We are pleased to inform you, it read, that you are one of the 5 final candidates for Time's 2024 Person of the Year. My name was listed alongside a globally recognized climate activist, the tech billionaire my father admired for his Mars ambitions, a dissident political leader currently in exile, and the President of the United States. And then, Riley Calder, founder, Coalition Atlas. It was a typo. It had to be a typo. I was a girl in a drafty room with a server bill. They were planets. I was a speck of dust. I forwarded the email to Maya, Ben, and Aisha with a single word: triage. The emergency video call was chaos. Ben was just vibrating, his camera shaking. Holy, holy, holy. Aisha was crying, her hands over her mouth. Riley, oh my God, oh my God. Maya was the only one who looked calm, which is how I knew she was terrified. She had her crisis management face on. Okay, Maya said, her voice cutting through the noise. This is a 1 in a million shot, but we have to treat it like a 1-in-1 shot. Ben, I want a full-scale analysis of our server capacity. If we win, our site traffic will multiply by 1,000% in 1 second. It'll break us. Aisha, you start drafting 3 press releases. We won. We were honored to be nominated, and this was never about one person, Riley. It's not going to be me, I said, my voice hollow. It's absurd. They're just putting me on the list to look in touch, to show they care about the little guy. I'm the token, the every woman. It's a PR move. They'll give it to the president. It doesn't matter if it's a PR move, Maya snapped, her patience thin. You are officially, right now, on the same stage as the most powerful people in the world. And that makes you one of the most powerful people in the world. For the next 3 weeks, we are going to use it. What is our message? What is our single, core message for the platform, right now? We spent the next 2 hours whiteboarding a POTI contingency plan, and I hated every second of it. Of course, the shortlist didn't stay internal for long. I don't know how these things get out. A source, a leak, a political blogger tweeted it first. Sources confirm Time's 2024 POTI shortlist, and the inclusion of labor activist Riley Calder is a major shakeup. By noon, it was everywhere. My name, my actual name, was trending on social media. The hashtag Coalition Atlas was suddenly secondary to Riley Calder. And then, The real storm began. Not the media, the workers. The Coalition Atlas inbox, which was normally full of grim reports and quiet questions, exploded. But it wasn't reports. It was congratulations. It was hope. We saw the news. You are speaking for all of us. I'm a warehouse picker in Kentucky. I've been following you for a year. Give 'em hell. Ms. Calder. They see you. That means they finally have to see us. I sat there, reading the messages, and the weight of it, the sheer, crushing responsibility, felt heavier than any insult my family had ever thrown at me. This wasn't a game. This wasn't about winning. These people, who had nothing, were pinning their hopes on me. The girl with the parasite label. If I was the token, I couldn't bear the thought of letting them down. And just as I was drowning in that wave of responsibility, the other tide came in. The tide I had been dreading. The muted Calder family group chat, which had been silent since my father's PR comment, lit up. A text from Aunt Patrice. Oh my goodness. A friend from church just called me. She saw on the news about Riley and Time. I just told her. Oh yes, we are all so proud of her. We've just been praying and praying for her success. A text from Uncle Frank. I'm posting the link on my Facebook. Always knew that girl had spunk. She gets that work ethic from our side of the family. That's for sure. The hypocrisy was so blatant, so immediate, it gave me vertigo. Spunk. Praying for her success. I felt a laugh, a dry, bitter bark, escape my lips. The parasites were back, but this time, they were the ones looking for a host. Then my phone buzzed with a private message, a number I still knew by heart, but hadn't seen in a private text for over a year. Jenna. Hey, so, things are crazy online. People are saying you're up for that Time thing. Is this, like, a real thing? Or some kind of internet scam? Just checking. I stared at the message for a full minute. I read every word, decoded every nuance. She was testing the waters. She was trying to figure out if I was a legitimate, bankable asset she could brag about, or if I was still just an embarrassment who had somehow pulled off a massive public fraud. She needed to know if my stock was real before she invested. I didn't reply. The silence, apparently, was my answer, because an hour later, my phone rang with a video call. Mom and Dad. My thumb hovered over the decline button. I took a deep breath. You're not in trouble. You're in charge. I hit accept. Their faces filled the screen. My mother. Her hair perfectly done. Her smile brittle and bright. My father, hovering in the background, pretending to read the newspaper, but his eyes darting to the camera. They looked flustered. Riley, honey, my mother's voice was a full octave higher than usual. We saw the news. Your father's office called. A neighbor brought over a paper. It's just wonderful. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. She plunged ahead, her hands fluttering in front of her. Listen, your father and I, we've just been talking, and it's all happening so fast. And we just want to make sure that we're supporting you. Supporting me, I repeated. It was a flat, dead sound. Yes, of course. And, we were just wondering if reporters start calling us, here in Maple Ridge, what should we tell them? There it was, not, we are so profoundly sorry, not, we were blind, arrogant, cruel fools, not, we finally understand. Just, what's our script? My father put his paper down and moved into the frame, his face a mask of paternal seriousness. What your mother means, Riley, is that we don't want to say the wrong thing. We want to be on message. We want to present a unified front. On message. The phrase hit me like a slap. A unified front, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. What message would that be? Dad? The parasite message? The unemployed one message? The hobby? Riley! My mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest. That's not fair. We were We were just worried about you. We always knew you were special." "You always knew," I repeated. "Right. So what should we say?" my father pressed. His voice strained. He was getting angry, but he was holding it back. He was talking to a party candidate now, not his failure of a daughter. Should we just tell them that we encouraged your interests? That we're just a normal family, and we're proud?" I just looked at them, at these two strangers, with my parents' faces, asking me for talking points, asking me to help them rewrite history, asking me to absolve them, live on national television. They weren't sorry. They were terrified. They were terrified that the story I'd told in that first feature, the one they'd dismissed as PR, was now the official, historical record. They weren't trying to fix their relationship with me. They were trying to fix their image. "You want to know what to say?" I said, the realization settling in me, cold and hard. "You want to know what to say, to look good." "Riley, that is so unkind," my mother cried, her eyes filling with tears. "We are your family. We just want to help." "You want to help now," I said. "I have to go. My team is waiting for me." I hung up. I didn't even see their faces before I hit the button. My hands were shaking. My phone rang again, almost immediately. I thought it was them. I almost threw it. But the caller ID was from New York. It was David Chen. "Riley," he said, his voice all business. "The shortlist leak is off the charts. The engagement is through the roof. The every woman against the Titans angle is, well, it's just fantastic." "It's not an angle, David," I said, my voice sharp. "It's my life." Right, exactly, he said, not missing a beat. "Which is why we want to lean into it. The readers. They really connected with that Thanksgiving anecdote from the feature." My blood ran cold. "David, what do you want?" "We want to do a follow-up, a short video piece, for the reveal week, and we want to come to Maple Ridge." I said nothing. My throat was too tight. "Just a day, maybe 2, he continued. The idea clearly mapped out in his head. "We'll get some B-roll of your hometown, you know, the place that started it all, and we'd love to get a short, sit-down interview with your parents." I couldn't breathe. "We see it as a healing moment," he said, his voice warming, selling it. "A real, look at her now vibe. Maybe we could even stage a simple, cozy family dinner. The contrast between that image, the image of redemption, and the one you painted in the article. Riley, it's an incredibly powerful narrative." I sat there, and I saw it all. He was offering me the ultimate, final checkmate. He was offering me a stage, cameras, and my entire family, forced to perform redemption for the world. He was offering me their public, humiliating surrender, my father, my mother, forced to smile and say, "We are so proud." And in that same awful moment, I saw the other version, my parents, turning those cameras on me, my father, performing tough but fair dad, my mother, worried, loving mom. They would use time, they would use David, they would use the cozy dinner to absolve themselves, to paint themselves as the loving foundation of my success. They would use my platform to rewrite their own story. This wasn't my story. This was a soap opera, and I was done with it. "David," I said, and my voice was suddenly completely steady. "No." There was a stunned silence. "No? No, absolutely not. My family is not part of this story. They are not the redemption arc. They are not props. They are not the contrast. The work is the work. The movement is the movement. You can come to my office. You can meet my team. You can come with me to a community meeting in Detroit and talk to real workers. But you cannot come to Maple Ridge. You cannot film my parents." "Riley," he started, "I think you're missing the—" "No, you're missing the point," I said, standing up, my hands clenched. "You said it yourself. I'm on a list with presidents. I'm not a child anymore. I will not be using my family as an emotional narrative device, and I will not be letting them use me as one. The story is the atlas. Take it or leave it. I hung up. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would break a rib. That no felt bigger than any yes of my life. I knew a phone call was just air. I needed a firewall. I opened my laptop, my fingers flying. Dear David, following up on our call, to be unequivocally clear, North Star Civic Lab and Coalition Atlas will not be participating in any segments, photo or video, that involve my family or my hometown. My parents are private citizens, and I will not be using them as a narrative device. I paused, the word parasite flashing in my mind. This nomination is not about me. It is about the collective power of the millions of workers whose stories we are trying to elevate. I would be happy to arrange interviews with any of them. That is the only story I am interested in telling. Best, Riley Calder. I stared at the send button. This was it. This was the move that could get me labeled difficult. This could get me kicked off the magical, absurd list. This was a direct refusal of the powerful narrative. I thought of my mother's fake smile, and my father's request for talking points. I hit send. My hands were perfectly still. The email from David Chen had been a dare. My refusal to involve my family had been a final, terrifying bet on myself. I half expected a terse reply, a thank you, we're no longer interested. Instead, I got a single line back. Understood. The story is the atlas. We'll proceed on your terms. The final 2 weeks were a blur. We'd done the final, quiet interview in the office. They'd taken photos of the whiteboard, of Maya and Ben and Aisha at their secondhand desks. It felt real. And then, the countdown began. The announcement was scheduled for the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, to be aired in a live, primetime special. Thanksgiving itself was the day the magazine would hit every newsstand in the world. The cover finally revealed. My phone rang, a Maple Ridge number. My mother, I let it go to voicemail. Her message was breathless, a frantic performance of maternal warmth. Riley, honey, we're just so excited. All this news. We're expecting you for Thanksgiving. Of course, you have to come home. We're telling everyone. Your father he's just bursting with pride. Come home. Honey, please, we'll have your favorite, the pecan pie. Let's just celebrate, as a family. The lies were so thick, I could barely hear the words. We're telling everyone, bursting with pride. They were terrified. They were laying a trap of family unity to save themselves. And yet, a dark, stubborn part of me wanted to go. I wanted to see their faces. I made a plan. I would not be there for the dinner. I would not be there for the charade of celebration, but I would go. I would arrive late. I would be a polite, distant guest, just long enough to show them I wasn't scared of them. I would keep the visit civil, short, and on my terms. I told Maya this plan. She just looked at me. Are you sure? I need to, I said. I need to close the file. Wednesday, announcement day, the day before Thanksgiving. Our office, the drafty, 3-room space that was the global headquarters of the Coalition Atlas, was a tomb. Maya, Ben, and Aisha were there. They had brought in a small, ancient television with a coat hanger for an antenna. They had bought a bottle of cheap champagne, which sat, sweating and pathetic, on Ben's desk. The broadcast was at 8 p.m. In Maple Ridge, Ohio, 400 miles away. My family was in the throes of Thanksgiving prep. The TV was on in the den, but only as background noise. They were chopping celery, brining the turkey, arguing over who made the best stuffing. My phone buzzed, a text from Uncle Frank. Headed to your folks' place. Can't wait to see the big celebrity. Ha ha ha. My stomach turned. I put my phone on silent and dropped it in my bag. I'm not watching, I announced to the room. I was pacing. My nerves stretched so thin I thought I would snap. Riley, sit down, Maya ordered. You're making the floorboards squeak. I can't. It's not going to be me. Maya, it's going to be the president, or the Mars guy. This entire thing is ridiculous. I'm the token. I should be working. For the love of God, Ben said, his eyes glued to the screen. It starts in 5 minutes. Just shut up and pace. But watch. The broadcast began. The music was self-important and sweeping. The anchor's voice was grave. A year of unprecedented change, a world in flux. Tonight, we name the 2024 Person of the Year. In Maple Ridge, my father muted the commercials, but left the show on. The family was gathered in the kitchen. The sound of the broadcast a dull murmur from the other room. They were tasting, stirring, laughing. "So," my Uncle Frank said, his voice loud enough to carry over the din, "is our little Riley really coming home tomorrow?" "She said she'd be here," my mother's voice, tight. She'll be here, late. She's very busy." "Busy," Frank boomed. "I'll say. Saw her in that magazine. Still don't get what she does. Some kind of imaginary job on the internet. But hey, if it gets you in a magazine, I guess it's a good gig. Eh, Mark?" My father's non-committal grunt. Back in the office, the anchor was listing the shortlist. The president, the tech billionaire, the dissident, the activist. As the anchor said, Riley Calder, a new kind of organizer, a woman who built a digital shield for the most invisible workers in America. My team was silent. I stopped pacing. I stood, frozen, in the middle of the room. The anchor continued. The choice, this year, was about power, where it comes from, who wields it, and who has the courage to build it from nothing. The broadcast cut to a short profile of the tech billionaire. "In Maple Ridge?" Jenna said. "Oh, it's definitely him. He's a genius. He's actually doing things, changing the world." My father nodded. "Absolutely. A man with a real vision." In the office, I started pacing again. "See? It's him. It's the Mars guy. This is over. Can we please turn this off and get back to work?" "Sit down," Maya hissed. The segment on the billionaire ended, then the one on the president. Then, the anchor's face was back. But true power isn't always in the corner office or the Oval Office. Sometimes it's in the data. Sometimes it's in the hands of the people who were told they had none. The camera panned over a shot of a warehouse, late at night, a graphic of the Coalition Atlas interface. My heart didn't pound. It just stopped. "Riley," Maya whispered. In Maple Ridge, the family was finally sitting down at the kitchen table for a late-night snack, the TV still murmuring from the den. "I just think," my Aunt Patrice said, "that all these social justice people, they just complain so much, you know? They don't build anything. They just tear things down." Here, Uncle Frank agreed, raising a beer. "As long as it's not one of them, I'm happy." On the television in my office, the anchor looked directly into the camera. In a year that tested the very structure of the American workforce, one person gave a voice and a weapon to the millions who were supposed to be silent. The 2024 Person of the Year is Riley Calder. It was as if all the sound in the world had been sucked into a vacuum. I didn't hear my name. I just saw my face. The picture from the office. The tired, determined one. And then the sound rushed back in. Ben let out a sound like a kettle exploding. Aisha was just screaming, a high-pitched, joyous, sobbing scream. The champagne bottle, forgotten, was suddenly being sprayed all over the server rack, and for once, I didn't care. Maya just lunged at me. She wrapped her arms around me so hard my ribs creaked, and she was just shouting, "You did it! You did it! You did it!" into my ear. And I was crying. I was ugly crying. The kind of sob I hadn't let myself have since the database crashed. It wasn't triumph. It was release. It was the weight of 1,000 days of no, of failure, of parasite, all just evaporating. In Maple Ridge, the sound from the den was low, but the graphic was unmissable. My face, 10 feet tall, on their high-definition TV, the iconic red border, and the name, Riley Calder. No one spoke. My mother, holding a half-eaten piece of pie, just stared. My Uncle Frank's beer was frozen halfway to his mouth. Jenna was the first to move. Her face was pale, a mixture of pure, unadulterated shock and a dawning, frantic calculation. A fork, the one in my mother's hand, slipped. It hit her plate with a sharp, ceramic clink that was the loudest sound in the entire state of Ohio. "Well," my father said, his voice a dry, rasping thing he didn't recognize. It's a mistake," my mother whispered. She was looking at the screen, at my face, as if it were an alien. That can't be right. They must have made a mistake. Mark, they'll fix it after the commercial." "No," Jenna said. Her voice was sharp. She had her phone out, her thumb flying, scrolling, her face getting whiter by the second. She was reading the article, the real one, the one that was now the most read story on planet Earth. It's not a mistake, Mom." She looked up from her phone, her eyes finally landing on my father. "It's real. Oh my God, it's real." The celebration at the office lasted for hours. My phone was not a phone anymore. It was a solid, vibrating brick of pure, unadulterated nuclear fusion. It was unusable. The president had tweeted his congratulations. The tech billionaire had tweeted, "Congratulations at Riley Calder. Let's talk about Mars." It was 4 a.m, Thanksgiving Day. My team was asleep on the office floor, curled up on beanbags and coats. I was still awake, the adrenaline fading, leaving a strange, quiet calm. My original plan, to arrive late, was still in place. I picked up my keys. I wrote a note on the whiteboard. "Gone to see the family. Don't break the server. Thank you." I drove the 400 miles from Harbor City to Maple Ridge in a daze. The sun came up. The highways were empty. I was the person of the year, and I was driving my 10-year-old sedan, the one with the rattling engine, to a house where I had been called a parasite. I pulled onto their street at noon. The street was quiet, no news vans, not yet. Time had kept the location private, for now. I parked. I walked up the same concrete path. I stood in front of the same red door. I could hear them inside. Not shouting, not laughing, muffled, tense. They were in there. And I knew, with absolute, soul-crushing certainty, that they had spent the entire morning watching the news, watching me, watching my face, my story, told over and over, on every channel. They knew I was coming. My hand, the one that had built the atlas, the one that had been photographed, was on the doorknob. I was no longer Riley, the unemployed one. I was no longer Riley, the failure. I was Riley Calder, a symbol, a weight. I took a deep breath, and I opened the door. I opened the door and stepped inside. The smell was the same, turkey, cinnamon, and the faint, dusty scent of my mother's anxieties. But the room was not the same. It was a vacuum. They were all there, frozen in a terrible tableau. My mother by the stove, her hand over her mouth. My father, standing stiffly by his armchair. Jenna, on the couch, her face pale and her phone clutched in her hand. Uncle Frank, Aunt Patrice, my cousins. They were all just staring. It was not the stare I was used to. It was not the pitying, dismissive, "Oh, here comes the failure" look. This was a new look. It was the look of people seeing a ghost, or a monster, or worse, a celebrity. They were looking at me as if I had just stepped, fully formed, out of the television screen in the den, which, I supposed, I had. No one spoke. The silence was absolute, a heavy, ringing thing, punctuated by the drip, 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 of a coffee machine I had helped my mother buy 3 years ago. "Hello," I said. My voice was calm. It sounded unnervingly loud in the quiet. "Happy Thanksgiving." My father was the first to break. He was a bad actor in a play he hadn't rehearsed. He let out a short, strangled sound that was meant to be a laugh. "Riley!" he boomed, his voice a full octave too high and cracking on the last syllable. He took 2 steps toward me, his arms half raised for a hug he wasn't sure he was allowed to give, then let them drop. There she is, the woman of the hour. He wouldn't look me in the eye. His gaze was fixed on a spot just over my left shoulder. I always knew it," he stammered, rubbing his hands on his pants. "I told your mother, didn't I, Elaine? I said, that girl is going to make it big. I always said it." The lie was so bald, so pathetic, it didn't even make me angry. "Hi, Dad," I said. My mother just wept, a small, hiccuping sound. "Oh, Riley," she whispered, her hands fluttering. Your face, it's everywhere." I walked past them, into the dining room. The table was set with the good china, the one I had been mocked over just a year prior. I sat down in my usual spot. "It smells good, Mom." This simple act, this adherence to the old script, seemed to break the spell. It was as if I had given them permission to be human again. They scrambled, they moved, they started talking, all at once, in a frantic, high-pitched cacophony. "A plate! Get her a plate!" my mother shrieked, rushing to the kitchen. "Riley, a drink? A beer?" Uncle Frank offered, his face a mask of confusing awe. Sit down. Everyone, let's just eat," my father commanded, taking his seat at the head of the table. I accepted a plate. I took a helping of turkey. I spooned mashed potatoes onto my plate, the same way I had done my entire life, and I just watched them. I saw their eyes. They kept looking at me, then quickly looking away, as if I were the sun. I saw the calculation in Jenna's stare. I saw the confused, almost childlike fear in my mother's. I saw the dazed, half-formed regret in my father's. But mostly, I saw calculation. I saw them all, in real time, trying to figure out how this new Riley slotted into their lives, how this new fact benefited, or threatened, them. It was my Aunt Patrice who, in her typical, clumsy way, made the first move. "Well, Riley," she said, her voice trembling with manufactured warmth. "This is all, it's just so much. And if you need anything, if they make a documentary or a movie, and you need your family to appear, we are just here for you. Honey, 100%. I nearly choked on my water. A movie. She was already casting herself. I set my glass down. "Thank you, Aunt Patrice," I said. "I'll keep that in mind." That's when Jenna, my sister, who had been uncharacteristically silent, found her footing. She had clearly been processing, calculating, and had now arrived at her new, official position. She let out a bright, tinkling laugh. "Oh my God, Aunt Patrice, don't be so dramatic." She turned to the whole table, her face a mask of beaming, sisterly pride. I mean, am I surprised? No, I am not surprised. I have been telling all of you for years that my sister is a literal genius. The room nodded, everyone quickly agreeing. "Oh, yes," Jenna always said. "I mean," she continued, "the things she can do with a computer, it's on another level. I've always been her biggest supporter, haven't I, real?" She smiled at me, a brilliant, terrifying smile, her eyes wide, willing me to agree, to join her in this new, shared reality. "I just knew," she said, her voice dropping to a more sincere level, "that all that confusion from a few years back was just a misunderstanding. People just didn't get your vision, but I always did." Ah, there it was, the pivot. "You mean the confusion about the house?" I asked. My voice was neutral, just a simple question. Jenna's smile didn't waver, but a small muscle in her jaw twitched. "Exactly. The house. Oh, God. That was all so silly, wasn't it? Just a silly family mix-up. She waved her hand, dismissing the entire incident. And honestly, thank God you didn't co-sign. It would have been a mess. We're actually looking at a much better property now, on the lake. It's all working out for the best, isn't it? She was already rewriting history. She was trying to erase the parasite, the selfishness, the black hole. She was trying to make it a silly mix-up. I set my fork down. The little clink it made on the china was loud. The room went quiet again. A silly mix-up, I repeated. Jenna, I said, my voice still perfectly calm. I don't think you're remembering that right. I picked up my phone, my new, very secure phone, paid for by the Foundation's operating budget. I unlocked it. We're all family here, right? I said, looking around the table. We should be honest. I navigated to my old, muted Calder family group chat, the archive, the receipts. I just want to clear up the confusion, I said. I angled my phone so my father and Jenna and my mother could see the screen. I started scrolling, slowly. Here's one, I said. This is from you. Jenna. A screenshot of my old apartment. The caption was, upgraded to a hovel, just for fun. Do you remember that silly mix-up? Jenna's face went white. Oh, I continued, scrolling. Here's another. From Dad. I didn't read the whole thing. I didn't need to. The subject, I said, looking at him, is parasite, an adult responsibility. I don't remember that being a mix-up. Dad, it felt pretty clear at the time. My father's face was a mottled, furious red. He looked like he wanted to break the table, or me. But he was sitting at a table with the person of the year, and he was silent. And, I said, here's the text from Mom. After that parasite call. Come back when you're grown up. I'm still not sure if I've met that requirement. Mom, am I grown up yet? My mother was just crying, shaking her head, her face buried in her napkin. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it. You meant it, I said, not unkindly. You all meant it. You just didn't mean for this to happen. I gestured to the room, to the uneaten food, to the TV in the other room, which was, I knew, still running segments about me. The room was a tomb. The jury, which had once found me guilty, was now staring at the evidence of its own, profound and total misjudgment. But you know what the silliest part of this mix-up is? Jenna, I said, putting my phone down. You were right about one thing. It's good I didn't co-sign for you, but not for the reason you think. I looked at her. You see, 2 years ago, after the supermarket story, and that first big institutional grant, the North Star Civic Lab was finally stable. We had real, tangible assets, and so did I. I got approved for a pretty substantial personal line of credit from the same bank. In fact, I could have co-signed. I could have bought your house for you. I had the clean credit and the assets. I had nothing to lose, as you put it. Jenna just stared at me, her mouth open. But then, I said, my voice still quiet, I reread that group chat. I reread the text where you called me a black hole of need, and the one where Dad called me a parasite, and I had a thought. I looked from my father, to my sister, to my mother. I thought, what if I used that line of credit? What if I leveraged my own financial stability, not to bail out the people who thought I was a failure, but to help the people who were counting on me? So, I did. I used that entire line of credit, I said, to establish the Atlas Legal Aid Fund, a dedicated, protected fund to pay for legal representation for the workers who use our platform. I didn't co-sign your loan, Jenna, because I was too busy co-signing lawsuits against companies who steal from their workers. The silence in the room was no longer just silence. It was a black hole. They understood. Finally, they understood. In the only language they had ever respected, money. They understood that their words, their jokes, their worries, had cost them, not just their pride. It had cost Jenna a house. It had cost them, all of them, any claim to my success. My mother, her voice thick with tears, finally looked up. We were just trying to help you. Riley, we wanted what was best for you. We just wanted you to be stable." This was the last desperate line of defense, the "we were just parents" plea. I looked at her, and for the first time, I felt, not pity, but a kind of clinical sadness. Stable for who? "Mom," I asked. "Stable for you to look at? Stable for your friends? At church? Was it my stability you were worried about? Or your own? Because the people I work for, they aren't worried about stability. They're worried about their next meal. They're worried about getting fired because they're sick. They're worried about their power being shut off because their paycheck was miscalculated by $10. I leaned forward, and I told them. I told them about the bakery workers in Fresno. I told them about the home care aide in Florida who was working 20-hour shifts. I told them about the truck driver who was sleeping in his cab because his wages were being garnished for insurance he didn't even have. I made them listen. I made them listen to the stories they had spent a decade calling complaining. I made them listen to the lives they had dismissed as someone else's problem. When I was done, no one was looking at me. They were all studying their plates, their hands, the table. I reached into my bag. I pulled out a thick, professionally bound envelope. I slid it onto the center of the table, on top of the Thanksgiving centerpiece. Jenna flinched, as if it were a bomb. My father stared at it, as if it were a bill. "This," I said, "is the first annual report for the Atlas Legal Aid Fund. It details the 212 cases we funded this year. It details the $1.2 million in stolen wages we've recovered." I stood up. My plate was still full. I wasn't hungry. "This," I said, tapping the report, "is my family. These 212 people, the people in this report, and the team that I work with every single day." I looked at the ring of stunned, broken faces, the people I shared blood with. "As for this family," I said, "the one at this table, I'm still not sure I want to stay." When I stood up, the illusion of the happy Thanksgiving dinner, which had been barely holding on by a thread, shattered completely. My bag was in my hand. I was halfway to the door. My mother jumped up, her napkin falling to the floor. "Riley, wait. Don't go. Not like this. Please. Your father. Mark, say something." My father stood, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. He looked trapped. He was a man who was used to being the loudest, most confident voice in every room, and for the first time, he looked small. He was trying to regain his footing. "Your mother is right," he said, his voice attempting its old, authoritative tone, but it came out strained. Let's go into the study. We should talk about this, properly, as a family." There it was, the maneuver, the private family talk, the same tactic they had always used, the part where they would close the door, and the volume would rise, and the tears would come, and they would use the shared history of family to grind me down, to make me feel guilty, to smooth over the public humiliation with private emotional blackmail until I was the one apologizing for making them feel bad. I stopped, but I didn't turn back toward the study. I turned back to the table. "No," I said. The word hung in the air, cold and sharp. "I'm not going into the study," I said, my voice quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. "I'm not having a private, whispered family talk. We're done with those. I've been asking for an honest conversation for 10 years. Dad, you wanted to wait until I was on the cover of Time magazine. Well, congratulations. You got your wish. We'll have it right here. In the room where you laughed at me." I put my bag down. I was no longer the defendant. I was the one holding the trial. This title," I said, gesturing to the silent, accusing TV in the den, which was still running a loop of my face. "This Person of the Year, it's not a family trophy. It's not something you get to put on the mantle next to Jenna's marketing awards." I looked at them, one by one. Aunt Patrice, Uncle Frank, my cousins, all of them, trapped at the table. This, I said, is for the woman in Nebraska whose boss stole her wages for 6 years. It's for the bakery workers in Fresno. It's for Maya and Ben and Aisha, who believed in this when it was just an error message and a $30 server bill. It's for every single person who reports to the Atlas, who trusts us with their story when the world told them they didn't have one. I let that sink in. But, I continued, it is also one other thing. It's proof. It's the final, objective, globally recognized receipt that every single time you called me unemployed, you were wrong. Every time you called me lazy, you were wrong. Every time you called me a parasite, you weren't just wrong. I looked at my father. You were cruel. Riley, my mother sobbed, her hands twisting in her lap. We didn't mean it. We didn't know, my father blurted out, his face pale, his eyes darting between me and my mother. We were just scared. This was it, the last line of defense, the fumbling, pathetic excuse. You were scared, I said. You were scared I wouldn't have a pension, that I wouldn't have health insurance. Yes, he said, grabbing onto the word. Yes, we were just being parents. No, I said. I cut him off, and he flinched, genuinely shocked. I had never interrupted him in his own house. No, Dad, that's not good enough. Not anymore. You didn't need to understand the technology, I said, my voice clear and steady. You didn't need to know what a server was. You didn't need to understand public policy or database architecture. You just needed to see me, your daughter. You just needed to see that I was working 14-hour days. You just needed to hear the passion in my voice. The one time I tried to tell you about it, you just needed to not laugh. I looked him right in the eye. You didn't need to be a tech expert, Dad. You just needed to be a father. And in that, you failed. He actually took a step back, as if I had hit him. I picked up my bag. I was really leaving now. You wanted to help, I said, looking at my mother's tear-streaked face. You wanted to be on message. You wanted to be in the documentary. Aunt Patrice looked up, confused. What documentary? Oh, I said, letting out a small, sad laugh. You didn't know? After I refused to let Time film a cozy family dinner here, they called back. After the announcement, they're doing the big follow-up piece. The day in the life, the big honor. They asked again. They said, "Are you sure you don't want to film with your family? It's the celebration." My father was leaning forward, his eyes suddenly bright. My mother was holding her breath. This was it, the chance, the redemption, the public absolution. They wanted to film the celebration, I said. So I told them yes. A wave of relief flooded my mother's face. Oh, Riley. I told them I would love for them to film me, with my family. I continued. So, I made a request. I asked them to send the camera crew, not here. Their smiles froze. I asked them to send the crew to the Teamsters Union Hall in Detroit, and to the Amazon warehouse picket line in Stanton, and to the late-night shift at the Harbor City Hospital, to sit with the nurses. I looked at their faces, their frozen, devastated, uncomprehending faces. I told Time that that was my family, the people in the report on this table, and that was the celebration I wanted the world to see. I paused, and David Chen, he agreed. They're filming it next week. The realization finally landed. It was the sound of the last door slamming shut. It was the sound of their lost opportunity, the sound of their final, public irrelevance to my story. They hadn't just lost their daughter's respect. They had lost their ticket to the spotlight. They had lost their chance to go on message. I was at the door now. My hand was on the knob. I'm not going to cut you off, I said, looking back at them, this ring of broken, silent people. I'm not that person, but I am not this person, either. I gestured to my empty chair. The family punching bag, the unemployed one, that That girl is gone. So we're done with these gatherings. We're done with the jokes, the pity, the advice. We are done with all of it. From now on, I said, we have boundaries. You can be in my life, maybe, but you will respect my work. You will respect my team. And you will never, ever use me as your emotional support animal or your free babysitter again. Is that clear? They just stared. Jenna, who had been silent this entire time, her face a mask of complex, churning calculation, finally found her voice. It was small, weak, the voice of someone whose entire worldview had just been liquidated. So what now? She whispered, looking up at me. Who is your family? Then, Riley? If it's not us? I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I just felt a deep, profound distance. My family, I said, are the people who send me emails at 3 a.m, saying thank you for seeing me. My family are the people who believed in me when I was sleeping on a mattress and living on ramen, when no one in this house would even return my calls. My family is Maya, and Ben, and Aisha, and the board of the North Star Civic Lab. That is my family. I looked at Jenna. And maybe, I added, my voice softening, just a fraction. Maybe, one day, if you ever figure out how to live a life that isn't just about you, maybe you too. I didn't wait for an answer. I walked out. I closed the door behind me. I got in my car. I drove through the quiet, sleeping streets of Maple Ridge. I didn't look back. I drove all day, back to Harbor City. The radio was on. My name was everywhere. They weren't just talking about the award. They were talking about the work, about the atlas, about wage theft. A host said, Riley Calder has become a symbol of hope for the new working class. I heard the words. Symbol. Person of the year. It still felt strange, like a suit that didn't quite fit. But failure? Parasite? Those words. They were gone. They were just dust in the rearview mirror. I wasn't a failure. I wasn't a symbol. I was just me. And for the first time, that felt like enough. 1 week later, the ceremony, it was in New York. It was full of famous, powerful people, the ones my family reads about, the ones my father admires. I was in a borrowed dress. I felt like an imposter. They called my name. I walked up to the podium. The lights were blinding. I looked out at all those faces, presidents, billionaires, actors. I put my notes down. I want to tell you a short story, I said. My voice was shaking, but it was clear. A few years ago, I was sitting at a Thanksgiving dinner, and I was toasted. As the unemployed one who still found a seat, I was called a failure, a joke, because my job wasn't a job. It was just a project on a computer, because I didn't have a 401k. The room, which had been full of polite applause, went completely, deathly silent. They were listening. That project, I say, was the Coalition Atlas, and I am willing to bet that almost every single person in this room has been made to feel, at some point in their life, like the unemployed one at the table, been told their idea was a joke, been told their passion was a hobby, been told to grow up and get a real job. I looked out at them. This award, I said, is not for me. It is for every one of you. It's for every person who is currently being called a failure, while they are quietly, thanklessly, and exhaustingly busy changing the world. The applause, when it came, was not polite. It was a roar. After, I was backstage. My phone, the one that's supposed to be secure, was vibrating. I pulled it out. One new message, from my mother. We're watching on TV. Your father. He's not saying anything. We need time. But, Riley, you did the thing. You did the thing nobody even dared to dream. I read the text. I saw the fumbling attempt. You did the thing. I smiled, a small, real smile, and I put the phone back in my pocket, without replying. I wasn't angry, I wasn't sad, I was just done. I pushed open the stage door, into the hallway, and there they were. Not the celebrities, not the politicians. Maya, Ben, Aisha, and behind them, a dozen people I recognized from their emails. The baker from Fresno, the home care aide, the truck driver. My family. I walked toward them, and for the first time in my life, I knew exactly who I am. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. So drop a comment below and let's share our thoughts. Please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories. Like this video, and if you want to support this channel, hit that hype button so more people can hear this story.